When the Artemis II crew climbed out of the Orion capsule on April 10, 2026, one by one, stepping onto an inflatable raft floating in the Pacific Ocean, all four of them walked to the helicopters on their own. No wheelchairs, no stretchers, waving, smiling. Victor Glover even walked almost the entire way unaided. It looked fine. It looked normal. It looked like four healthy people who just went on a trip. But their bodies had just spent 10 days in one of the most hostile environments in the universe. And what was happening inside those bodies, in their bones, their blood, their immune systems, their vision, their cardiovascular systems, was not fine and normal at all. This is the story of what space actually did to the Artemis II crew. All of it is real. All of it is documented. And some of it has implications that go far beyond this one mission. Like and subscribe if you want to keep following this story. Let's get into it. The moment the rocket ignited on April 1st, the crew's bodies started changing. Not dramatically, not visibly, but at the cellular level, things began shifting almost immediately. The first thing that happens when you remove gravity from a human body is fluid redistribution. On Earth, gravity constantly pulls fluids downward, toward your legs, your feet, your lower body. Your cardiovascular system has spent a lifetime calibrated to this. Your heart pumps with a specific strength. Your blood vessels maintain a specific pressure gradient. Your body has a finely tuned system for managing fluid distribution, and it is built around one assumption, that you are standing or sitting in a gravitational field. Remove that field and fluids migrate upward, toward the chest, toward the face, toward the skull. Within hours of launch, the Artemis II crew's faces began to swell slightly. Their nasal passages became congested, not from a cold, but from fluid accumulation. Their legs, without gravity drawing blood downward, began to slim as fluids left them. Victor Glover reported early in the mission that the cabin temperature inside Orion was colder than expected. Cold enough that the crew wished they had brought different sleeping bags. But the congestion they were experiencing was not from the cold. It was their cardiovascular systems recalibrating to a world without gravity. This fluid shift toward the head also increases intracranial pressure, the pressure inside the skull. And elevated intracranial pressure is not benign. In astronauts who have spent extended time in space, this pressure increase has been linked to changes in the shape of the eyeball, flattening of the optic disc, and in some cases measurable changes in vision. These effects have been seen in ISS astronauts who spend 6 months or more in microgravity. Whether 10 days produces measurable permanent changes is one of the exact questions NASA's post-flight testing is designed to answer. As part of their post-landing evaluation, the crew went through eye and head movement assessments specifically to track these changes. They also completed balance tests, because the vestibular system, which controls your sense of balance and orientation, is profoundly disrupted by microgravity and takes time to recalibrate after return to Earth. Now let's talk about what was happening to their bones and muscles the entire time they were in space. The human skeleton is not static. It is constantly being broken down and rebuilt. Bone cells called osteoclasts dissolve old bone tissue, and cells called osteoblasts build new tissue. In a healthy person standing on Earth, this process is in rough balance. The mechanical load of gravity stimulates bone formation, keeping the system in equilibrium. Remove gravity, and that mechanical stimulus disappears. The osteoblasts slow down. The osteoclasts keep working. The result is bone loss, measurable, documented, and real. In astronauts on the International Space Station, bone density decreases at a rate of roughly 1% per month in weight-bearing bones. For a 6-month ISS mission, that represents significant bone loss that requires months of rehabilitation to recover. 10 days is not 6 months. But bone loss begins within days. Studies from space shuttle missions, which were typically 7 to 14 days in duration, similar in length to Artemis II, showed measurable early bone density changes even in those short time frames. The crew exercised every day during the mission, using compact resistance devices specifically developed for the cramped Orion capsule, which is about the size of a camper van rather than the football field-sized ISS. Exercise provides some mechanical loading that partially mitigates bone and muscle loss, but it does not eliminate it. Muscle loss also begins within days. Without the constant work of supporting your body against gravity, muscle fibers that are not being actively used begin to atrophy. The legs are particularly affected because on Earth you are constantly using your legs to stand, walk, and maintain posture. In zero gravity, your legs essentially have no load-bearing job. Within 10 days, measurable changes in muscle tone and strength begin. This is why, after splashdown, all 4 crew members walked from their helicopters to the medical bay. But they were also going to complete what NASA calls an obstacle course. Climbing a ladder, lifting objects, performing maneuvers that require balance and coordination. Not to test their fitness, but to measure how much their bodies had changed and how well they could function after 10 days of physiological adaptation in the wrong direction. NASA's flight surgeon explained the purpose directly. The obstacle course is relevant not just for reacclimation to Earth, but for preparing future crews for what they will experience when they land on the Moon. On the Moon, there are no recovery teams to help you out of the lander. There is no ship to airlift you to a medical bay. If you land on the lunar surface after a multi-day journey in microgravity and your legs do not work properly, that is not an inconvenience. It is a potential emergency. Now here is the part that goes deeper than muscles and bones, and it is the part that makes the Artemis II mission genuinely unprecedented from a medical standpoint. For the first time in over 50 years, human beings left Earth's protective magnetic field and traveled through deep space. Not the International Space Station, which orbits a few hundred miles above Earth and is still largely protected by the planet's magnetosphere. Deep space, beyond the magnetic bubble, into the full radiation environment of the solar system and the galaxy. Every member of the Artemis II crew wore a personal radiation dosimeter throughout the mission. Orion also carried 6 radiation sensors placed throughout the cabin to measure the radiation field in different positions and orientations, plus an upgraded German-built detector specifically designed to measure heavy ions, the most biologically damaging type of radiation, at 6 times the resolution of the instrument flown on Artemis I. The data coming back from those sensors is now being analyzed, and preliminary readings suggest the crew was exposed to slightly more radiation than NASA's pre-flight models predicted. Not enough to approach career limits, not a health emergency, but a discrepancy that scientists are taking seriously. Here is the specific concern. Galactic cosmic rays, high-energy particles born in supernova explosions and other violent events across the galaxy, are not like the radiation from an X-ray machine or a CT scan. They are not stopped by thin shielding. In fact, when these particles hit dense shielding material, they can produce secondary particles through a process called spallation. In some cases, adding shielding makes certain types of cosmic ray exposure worse, not better. The Artemis II crew burned through approximately 5% of their entire lifetime radiation allowance in 10 days. By comparison, spending a full month on the International Space Station produces the same total dose. But the ISS sits within Earth's magnetic field. The Artemis II crew went outside it entirely. The biological effects are not simple to track. Radiation damage to DNA does not necessarily produce immediate symptoms. Cancer risk increases gradually, accumulating over a lifetime. Effects on the cardiovascular system emerge over years. Potential neurological effects, cognitive changes, increased dementia risk at later ages are an active area of research with limited data, because the only humans who have ever traveled into deep space are the Apollo crews, a sample of 24 people studied over 50 years. The Artemis II crew are, in a real sense, adding themselves to that data set. Before launch, the crew did something unusual. They gave blood. Bone marrow cells were extracted from those blood samples and used to create what scientists call organ chips, devices roughly the size of a USB thumb drive containing living bone marrow tissue grown from each astronaut's own cells. These tiny biological avatars rode the entire mission inside Orion, exposed to the exact same deep space radiation environment as their full-sized counterparts. Bone marrow is one of the most radiation-sensitive tissues in the human body. It is responsible for producing all blood cells, red cells, white cells, platelets. Radiation damage to bone marrow can suppress immune function, cause anemia, and in severe cases lead to potentially fatal bone marrow failure. After splashdown, those organ chips will be compared to control samples that stayed on Earth. The comparison will show, at the cellular level, exactly what the deep space radiation environment did to the bone marrow of these 4 specific people. And because the chips are made from each astronaut's own cells, the results will be personalized. One crew member may show more radiation sensitivity than another. Those individual differences can then be used to tailor medical support for future long-duration missions. The crew also collected their own saliva throughout the mission by blotting it on special papers stored in small booklets. Orion has no refrigeration system, so traditional biological sample storage was impossible. The saliva samples will be analyzed after return for immune system biomarkers, and specifically, scientists will look for evidence of dormant viruses reactivating. This is something that has been documented in astronauts on the ISS. Herpes viruses, the ones that cause chickenpox and shingles, go dormant in the body after initial infection and can stay dormant for decades. Space stress, radiation, disrupted sleep cycles, physiological change, psychological pressure can reactivate these viruses. ISS astronauts have shown measurable increases in herpes virus activity during missions. Whether the deeper radiation environment of deep space, combined with the psychological experience of being farther from Earth than any human in 50 years, produces stronger reactivation, is a question the Artemis II saliva samples may help answer. Now let's talk about sleep, because this one surprised even the crew. Victor Glover reported during the mission that the cabin inside Orion was colder than expected, cold enough to affect sleep quality. Mission Control worked with the crew to warm things up. But temperature was not the only sleep challenge. The human sleep cycle is regulated by light, specifically by the transition between light and darkness that happens every 24 hours as Earth rotates. In space, that natural cycle does not exist. Inside Orion, the lighting is artificial and constant. The crew's circadian rhythms, the internal biological clocks that regulate sleep, hormone production, metabolism, and dozens of other physiological processes, were operating without their normal external cues. The crew wore watch-like wrist monitors throughout the mission that tracked movement and sleep quality in real time. That data was being transmitted to Mission Control and is now part of the post-mission analysis. How well did they actually sleep? How did sleep quality change over the 10 days? Were there patterns related to the stages of the mission? The launch stress, the deep space transit, the lunar flyby, the return. Sleep deprivation compounds every other physiological problem in space. Poor sleep impairs immune function. It slows tissue repair. It affects cognitive performance, reaction time, decision-making, emotional regulation. For astronauts on a future lunar surface mission who need to perform complex tasks while managing a challenging environment, understanding what disrupts sleep and how to mitigate it is not a quality of life issue. It is a safety issue. Here is what all of this means in the larger picture. The Artemis II crew is back on Earth. All 4 of them walked out of that capsule healthy, smiling, waving. The medical officer inside Orion told Mission Control that all 4 crew members were feeling great and ready to be extracted as soon as possible. But the real medical work is just beginning. The blood samples, the saliva samples, the organ chips, the radiation dosimetry data, the sleep records, the balance tests, the obstacle course performance, the vision assessments, all of it will feed into years of analysis. The crew will be monitored for long-term health effects as part of NASA's lifetime surveillance of astronaut health program. Some of the data will not be meaningful for years or decades. Because here is the truth. We are planning to send humans to the moon for weeks, then months, eventually for extended stays at a permanent base, and then further out for 2 to 3 year round trips to Mars. The Artemis II crew gave us 10 days of data from beyond Earth's magnetic field. That is more than anyone has provided in 54 years. It is not nearly enough to fully understand what deep space does to a human body over the timescales we are planning to use. Every biomarker, every dosimetry reading, every saliva sample, every sleep record from this mission is a brick in the foundation of knowledge that will eventually tell us whether it is possible to keep human beings healthy in deep space, not for 10 days, but for a lifetime of exploration. The crew of Artemis II walked off that recovery ship on their own 2 feet. That is the headline. The data they brought with them may matter more than anything they saw out the window. Subscribe to follow every development in this story as the science comes in. And if this video gave you something real, hit like. It means a lot. Stay watching.